Morning everyone. I thought I would do another live stream this morning about Bitcoin. It's hit another all-time high. To buy Bitcoin now at bitcoin.com.au will cost you $43,345. So I thought I'd do this live stream, and for those of you out there who would like to ask me any questions about Bitcoin, feel free. Remember, I've worked in technology for 21 years, got a whole lot of experience in technology. I've been studying Bitcoin since early 2017. I prepared a little bit of a slideshow for this morning, which I'd like to take you all through. I thought it'd be good to go back over some of my material from mid 2017 and early 2018. In particular, some of the material that I came up with in regards to Bitcoin's adoption rate and where we're currently at now. All right, let's have a look at the slideshow. Feel free to ask me any questions. Just post them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, so this table here. So back in 1994, the global adoption rate of the internet was 0.25%. And the big application was email. Now, at that time, use cases that were too early were online retail and streaming video. Fast forward to cryptocurrency in 2017, the global adoption rate was 0.5%. Now, that's an estimation. So there are other estimations that back then it was 0.1%. So let's say between 0.1% to 0.5%. The big use case was Bitcoin, and there was use cases that were just too early, which were most decentralized applications. Now, in terms of where we're currently at today with Bitcoin, I estimate we're around about 2% today in terms of global adoption, maybe a little bit less. So that is a big increase since 2017. Here we are, we're in early 2021. Now, the hockey stick starts at around about 2.5%. Once again, this gets back to Bitcoin's scarcity. This is the mining schedule. In my previous video, I discussed how there's a block reward halving every 4 years, so Bitcoin becomes more and more scarce. This is a graph that, a pie chart back in 2017 about the community engagement by gender. You can see that women were very underrepresented when it came to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Trying to change that to get more women into the space. The Netscape moment. So back in 1995, Netscape was released. Only around about 16 million people worldwide used the internet at that time. Today, more than 3.6 billion people across the world use the internet. And of course, this graph is a little bit old now, but there's more than that on the internet now. So when it comes to Bitcoin, the question is, has Bitcoin had its Netscape moment yet? Has an application come along that has just been the real killer use case to get a whole lot of people into Bitcoin? Now remember what we're talking about here. With Bitcoin, it gives us, for the first time, a way for one internet user to transfer a unique piece of digital property to another internet user, such that the transfer is guaranteed to be safe and secure. Everyone knows that the transfer has taken place. Nobody can challenge the legitimacy of the transfer. Consequences of this breakthrough are hard to overstate. Now, back in 2017, this graph was created. And what it shows is back in 2013, you can see the adoption of Bitcoin was at 0.01%. Now, in 2017, we went through a quote-unquote bubble where the adoption rate hit 0.1% or 0.1%. Now, as I said, today in 2021, global adoption is around about 2%. And at 2.5%, that's where the adoption hockey stick begins. So that's where we start to see huge numbers of people stampede into the cryptocurrency space. So you can see where we were in terms of the industrial revolution and post-industrial revolution, where we hit the digital age, fiat money and gold money. So you can see we've gone from an agrarian age to an industrial age to now a post-industrial revolution and into the digital age, which we're in now. So we've still got a long way to go in terms of adoption when it comes to Bitcoin. Some people out there, they say, oh, well, I'm too late with Bitcoin, I really missed that. Well, no, you're not too late with Bitcoin. This thing has really only just gotten started. And this is why there were articles published recently and some a couple of years ago talking about adoption rates and where you need to be in terms of how much Bitcoin you need to own to be in the top percentage of the world. Now, there's myself, there's friends of mine, people who I coached and helped to get into Bitcoin early on. Just with the Bitcoin that we own, we're in very high up in terms of the hierarchy, in terms of how much we own in comparison to the rest of the world. Now, over time, it's going to get harder and harder to buy Bitcoin in terms of owning one whole Bitcoin. It's already out of the means of the majority of people on planet Earth. At a price of over $40,000 Australian per Bitcoin, most people on the planet cannot afford to hold one whole Bitcoin. So in the future, whole coiners, or people who own more than one Bitcoin or more, will be very, very rare indeed. Again, another graph here about growth rates and the growth rate of the internet and technology events that occurred along that time. So you can see over time we had the introduction of the web when it was first introduced, and Mosaic came out, the early commercialization of the World Wide Web with web browser, Netscape Navigator and Mosaic, SSL encryption, and then streaming media, Amazon, Internet Explorer. We had the dot-com boom and bubble and the bust. But you can see that over time there's a whole lot of events that have occurred that for people who were really watching and people who were taking part in it, they could see where things were heading. And you can see we started off with a read-only web early on, then it was read-write as more people started putting up web pages, to then a social web in the early 2000s. Technology adoption rates: smartphones, web, mobile phone, PC, television, radio, telephone, and electricity. How many years it took for the US population to adopt those technologies. So it's interesting when looking at other technologies and comparing them to Bitcoin, thinking about how early we are in the Bitcoin cycle in terms of its technology adoption rate. So we're seeing in real time internet money that is eating the world, so to speak. It's very interesting to watch. Now, the law of diffusion of innovation, the adoption curve of blockchain, back in 2017, still in the early adopters. I say we're still in the early adopter stage now, but there's this concept known as the chasm, where a technology has to pass over the chasm, and if it doesn't pass over that, then it's not going to be widely adopted. Now, I believe that Bitcoin has firmly passed over the chasm, and it's headed towards the majority and the early majority. So you can see here, in 2022, we're talking mainstream recognition of Bitcoin, and I think here we are in 2021, and Bitcoin has pretty much become a global brand name. So this is a 2018 graph, and saying that we're still very early in between the innovators and the early adopters. So we're a little bit further along that chart now. And as I was saying, the chasm, or the once a technology passes the chasm, it gets to a tipping point, and I believe that Bitcoin is most likely at the tipping point right now. Now, there's a book by an author by the name of Malcolm Gladwell, and he wrote all about tipping points. It's something that I encourage you all to check out. Because once the technology reaches the tipping point, that's where we get the hockey stick growth, and we go through a huge growth in that technology. This pie graph I made up in 2017. Back then, there was a very, very small adoption of Bitcoin wallets in comparison to the number of global internet users. That has increased slightly since then. When I say when you look at that pie graph, it's still a very, very tiny slice. But we've had a huge amount of adoption since then, but it still looks like a very tiny slice of the internet in terms of how many people are on the internet. So bottom line, we're still very, very early with Bitcoin. So that's what I was talking about, the chasm risk there. If a technology fails to be adopted, it falls down the chasm and it doesn't get to the early majority or early mass of people. As I was saying, I believe that Bitcoin has passed that point. It's a little bit old now. This saying that Bitcoin has been around for over 6 years, so it's been around since 2009. So it's around about 12 years now, and it was saying it's potentially at that point, potentially nearing the tipping point of S-curve adoption. Now we're past that, or we're right at that tipping point of S-curve adoption. As I said, that's where it reaches an exponential curve or hockey stick type graphic on a graph. So we're at a very exciting point when it comes to Bitcoin. See here, time to reach 100 million users took Google Plus 7 months, Facebook 36 months. Sorry, MySpace 36 months, Facebook 54 months, Twitter 62 months, and LinkedIn 106 months. Now, it's interesting because Bitcoin is one of the fastest growing technologies that's ever been created. In the past, some people have said, oh, look, Bitcoin is not being adopted, not many people are using it, etc. Well, that's actually false. There's a lot of people using it, and it is getting very, very quickly adopted in comparison to other technologies. So you see here with Facebook, 6.4 years it took Facebook to reach 50% of its global market potential. As I was saying in one of my previous videos, in terms of the value capture, with the existing internet, the money has been made at the application stack. So the big platforms, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Netflix, Alibaba, etc. That's where the majority of the money has been made, and the money wasn't being made at the protocol level. Whereas now in the blockchain internet, the majority of the money is accruing to the tokens themselves, with a smaller amount of money accruing to the big platforms. So it's very exciting that the average person can just buy up the tokens, and that's where the money is going to be made. That opportunity wasn't available in the previous version of the internet. This is an older graph. I don't have an updated version of this, but there are updated versions out there. In 2021, we've had a massive increase in the money supply, both here in Australia and worldwide, and it looks like a hockey stick now. So that money has to end up somewhere. It's ending up in assets. That's why we're seeing asset price inflation. The average person who doesn't own a whole lot of assets is going backwards as governments and central banks around the world print as much ridiculous amounts of money. So some of that money is ending up in Bitcoin. People who are wise are buying up Bitcoin because it has a fixed supply, unlike fiat currencies or paper money. So the government's got a money printer, and it's very tempting to use it when times are bad, like they currently are due to the coronavirus. But we the people, we need to be smart, and we need to buy up assets. Now, the coronavirus has really highlighted just how much the difference is between rich people and poor people. People who've got plenty of money, financial assets, land, property, etc. They've made absolute fortunes during this crisis. whereas the average person who doesn't have a whole lot of assets hasn't made that much, nowhere near as much in comparison. So the game is all about asset accumulation, and Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race, so to speak. Fixed supply. It's getting scarcer by the day. This graphic here shows a whole lot of technologies and in terms of their adoption curves. Now, Bitcoin is very early on in its adoption curve, but over time, as the years go on, it's going to look like this kind of curve. So various technologies are there: electricity, the internet, the automobile, television, radio, the internet. It's just very interesting to think about how many years it takes before a technology is widely adopted. So as I was saying, Bitcoin is one of the fastest growing technologies in existence that's ever been created. And I expect that we're going to see very, very steep growth of of Bitcoin users, because think about existing technologies. When television first came in, well, people had a reason to buy a television because they wanted to watch the content that was being produced. People wanted to have electricity so they could use appliances around the home. But with Bitcoin, people want to have Bitcoin because it's going up. It's increasing at such a very high percentage rate, and they need a place to put their savings. Now, storage of wealth and having a means to accumulate wealth in a vehicle which is secure and that is accruing wealth at a very, very high rate. Everybody has got the same problem. In fact, everybody on Earth has got the same problem: where to place their capital so that their capital will increase over time and will be a great store of value for those people over a long period of time. Now, traditionally, people have put their money into land, property, precious metals, other assets, so shares, bonds, stocks, etc. And it's interesting, my family put their money into land and property. My father was a very smart man. He bought oceanfront real estate back in the early 70s. Now, back then, that was a great store of value. There are other examples of this. I was just doing some analysis on there was a house in Port Melbourne in Swallow Street that it was around about 2 times the average wage in 1970, and now it's about 35 times the average wage. Back then, that land was surrounded by trains, shunting yards, train tracks, industrial property, etc. Now it's surrounded by Beacon Cove. So that whoever used that house as a store of value has made out like a bandit over time. Other people have not been so lucky. So everybody on Earth has got the same problem. They need a place to store value, and Bitcoin is, I believe, it's an emerging store of value, but it will become the best store of value on this planet. The ultimate collateral. People like Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy, he's seen this, he understands this, and that's why he's gone heavily into Bitcoin. And that's it. That's all I really wanted to present today. Bitcoin is over $41,000 Australian. Let me just have a look at the price now. I'll look it up real time. Price of Bitcoin is $41,618 Australian. Now, if you wanted to actually buy a Bitcoin though, via bitcoin.com.au, you're looking at 43,112 Australian dollars. Very interesting, very interesting. Many of you have had the opportunity, just as I did years ago, to accumulate as much Bitcoin as you get your hands on. What I find interesting about it is that very few people actually listened to me back then. A lot of people thought that I was crazy. Nerds like myself don't get into technologies like Bitcoin without a damn good reason, right? So it's very rare that you've seen me out here doing live streams, educating people, teaching people about Bitcoin, this and that. It's not something that I've traditionally done because I've been very focused on my day job and my work and earning money, etc., etc. So teaching doesn't pay the bills, but in my spare time, I have been trying to help educate people about Bitcoin because I saw what it meant for the average person. That it was an opportunity for the average person who doesn't have a whole lot of money to front run some of the biggest and nastiest corporations on earth who would be forced to buy up Bitcoin in the future. And that goes for governments and central banks as well. They too are going to be forced to buy it up worldwide. Now, rogue nations like North Korea, China, these nations have been buying up Bitcoin. Now, 4 years ago, I suggested to a number of government people that I work with that, hey, I should go to Canberra and start a new government department. And the purpose of the department should be to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible for the Australian people. And they all laughed at me. Clark, that's never going to happen. You're never going to be able to do that. You won't be able to convince anyone in Canberra to follow your lead on that. On and on they went. And they were right. Absolutely, they were right. If I walked into Canberra with that idea 4 years ago, or even today, the politicians would laugh at me. Well, you know, if I had my way, if I had more power in government, that's exactly what I would do. I would set up a department dedicated to accumulating Bitcoin on behalf of the Australian people. Because guess what? Over time, other countries are going to do it, and they're going to come out ahead. Now, at the moment, it's the rogue countries that have a whole lot of Bitcoin, and the developed countries, the more trustworthy countries, are going to have to follow suit, lest they be left behind. So, yeah. I hope you've all enjoyed this presentation about Bitcoin today. There's no questions in the chat, but you're welcome to message me privately. Once again, I do Bitcoin consultations for people. You can go to my website, intjbilling.com, if you're interested in my services. All the best, everyone. I'm Clark Towson.